Ever since armaments were added to Rise of Kingdoms, they have been a very highly controversial part of the game, with many people saying they are one of the key reasons that they think the game is extremely pay to win. And today, I'll be discussing the armament system and assessing it, deciding whether or not the system is better now or if it's still a very, very bad pay to win RNG fest. So if you're interested in the armament system, the improvements made over the last couple of years, and also a bunch of tips along the way to help you get better armaments or just use your armaments more efficiently, you want to stick around to the end of the video. Now, before we dive into whether or not the armament system is better, the first thing we really need to consider is what problems did it have before, so that we can decide whether it has actually been improved. And lucky for you guys, the list of problems is very short, but it was a really, really huge problem, and it was just everything was way too RNG based. Back when armaments first initially released, if you were a free-to-play low spender, the only real way to get them was through traveling or through the ability to dispatch from the state form. That was the only way to get armaments, and at the time you could not select your preferred formation, and especially when it came to traveling, you couldn't choose A, preferred formation as well, but B, you would get random items. So you may get 50,000 food, you might get a 30-minute speed up. There was no guaranteed armament. Nowadays, no matter when you travel, you're guaranteed to get at least a blue armament, and you can choose your formation, and we'll get into that later. But that meant to get an armament you wanted, first of all, you had to get lucky and get one of the, I think it was 6 or 7 formations that were in the game, and it had to be one that you really wanted. Then you had to hope that it had the stats that you wanted, because initially there was no way to change the stats on your armaments. And then finally, you had to hope it had the inscriptions you wanted. And on top of that, if you wanted a double inscription, you had to hope it had a double inscription. And if you wanted a legendary inscription, that would be way more difficult. So when it came to getting an armament that was really good, it was like a 1 in 2 million chance, to be realistic. So it was very rare to get anything amazing out of these armaments. And even back at its initial release, the pay to win section for armaments was really no better, because you'd have to buy all these armament chests and you only have a chance of getting stuff that you want, and there was no guaranteed value. That was easily the biggest issue with this system. There was no guaranteed value. No matter how much money you spent, no matter how much AP or time you spent, you couldn't get any guaranteed value out of the system, and there was really no progression besides just hoping for some good RNG. And that was definitely the biggest issue most players had with the armament system, and it certainly was the largest issue behind it. However, let's start off by going over the first thing that Lilith did to help and fix this issue that, well, I guess they created, but they are, or at least did work towards fixing, and it was the ability to transmutate your armaments. That means any inscribed legendary armaments, you can change the stats on them, and it is still RNG based, of course, but it is better than what we had before, which was basically nothing. So the ability to transmutate your armaments was the first step towards recovery for armaments, and it was probably the biggest one that we would ever get, because it allowed us to switch up stats on armaments that were the stronger ones which we owned, and it certainly had the biggest impact. However, at the time it was capped at 10 transmutations. This has since been changed, and now you can use transmutation crystals to reset your armament transmutation amounts, and technically you can transmutate an armament forever until you get the stats you want, which technically does give it a small sort of progression system. A quick tip when it comes to transmutating: transmutation stones are expensive, but they're accessible through the courier station inside of the, I don't know what section this is called, but inside of this section, you can purchase transmutation stones here. And I've seen a lot of people confused, where do you get transmutation crystals? Well, transmutation crystals come out of your individual rewards, and I'm pretty sure one of the main ones that I can remember most people can access is through spending crystals in your KVK. So let me just quickly find it. If you spend 60 million crystals and you get 30k honor, you will get yourself a transmutation crystal. It's one of the main ways to get access to them. I'm not sure if there are any other key ways. I know there's other KVK achievements. There's spend 8 million crystals and you will get one as well. So you can usually get 2 of these as a free to play if you're very active in your KVK. And of course, throughout your KVK, there are also a ton of free, pretty much, abilities to gain transmutation stones. So transmutation stones, while they're very expensive, are quite accessible throughout the KVK, and I'm pretty sure they have been added into the KVK shop here, and honestly, they're not the worst value. So transmutation stones, They're pretty easy to get. Transmutation crystals a little bit harder, but they are also available, and getting 2 of them per KVK I find is enough for most lower spenders free to plays. I haven't used any more than 2 of them really. So for the majority of a KVK, you'll notice transmutation crystals, you are perfectly fine with using them, and you will have a fairly good number of them. Not to mention they did give out a couple of free ones when they first added the system, and that's why I have one here since my KVK isn't over yet. But I should get another transmutation crystal by the end of it. One thing you should note though, when transmutating your armaments, I wouldn't just transmutate anything, only if it's got a really good inscription is the point I'd transmutate it. If you got something with an average inscription, so for example, let's see if I got something that's fairly average, maybe this parchment, it was kind of average. I don't know why I transmutated it, but for example, I probably wouldn't have done this. I know I did this when it first came out, at least when the system first released, but nowadays, it's quite easy to get some of those stronger armaments with better inscriptions, and we'll get into that later. So I would only transmutate if it's a really good armament. I would save those crystals for when it's worth it, and I wouldn't just use them randomly like I did when the system did first come out. But stuff like using it on rare inscriptions, using it on double inscriptions, using it on legendary inscriptions, these are the times I would consider using transmutations, and that's when it's going to be the most impactful for your account and give you the most value. The next thing that we received, which was a really big optimization, was the ability to choose formations. The fact that you couldn't choose your formations when the formation and armament system did first release was really bad. It pretty much made it impossible to get anything that you actually wanted from stuff besides the pick one chest. So initially this was a humongous issue, but the ability to choose up to 3, or really have to choose 3 different formations, has certainly helped the problem. One thing I can say about this is that when you're choosing your formation, I really recommend arch, wedge, and triple line. Maybe once we get the new formation with the combo attacks, we could see a good chance to pick that up as well. I'm not too into the Delta formation. I don't know 100% about it. I'll do more research. But if this is a really good formation, we can consider picking it up too. And I think it's a good thing that you have the ability to choose formations, because if they wanted to add more, you would certainly need the ability to pick between different ones. So the ability to pick 3, I think, is very reasonable. Currently, I do arch, wedge, triple line, just because I find that they're the 3 that I use the most, especially wedge and especially arch. The general consensus is wedge and arch are the best. Arch is really good for the smite commanders, wedge is really good for skill damage commanders, so I would really be mainly choosing between those 2. The other formations are very niche, and you probably won't use them in most situations. So just picking arch and wedge, you can get pretty decent trades by just running those. Even though it sounds a bit basic, it is certainly worth doing. The same thing can also be said for your dispatches as well. Just pick between the arch and wedge formation. One thing I will also note here is that once you do hit the state form to level 25, you will not need to pick up any of the stuff from the dispatch, such as these Sage's testimonies. So whenever you hit 25, you can ignore all of these. Don't even bother dispatching, because guaranteed you will refresh only 8 armaments per day, because I can't get Sage's testimonies anymore, which means I can just let them sit at the bottom while I do 8 armament formations or 8 armament runs each day. So once you hit 25, just ignore every single Sage's testimony thing here. It might look very ugly, it might drive you insane, but they will just save you probably about a day's worth of armaments and could get you around 5 or 6 extra free armaments. So once you hit 25, ignore the Sage's testimonies. Even before, I will just ignore them and focus on the armaments and only go for these at the last minute if you were really desperate. Also, you can always change these preferred formations, and then the next time you claim a new armament through your dispatch or a new one spawns, you can get that armament or have a chance of getting it between the 3 formations. So once again, that is a good change, has helped reduce the RNG, and definitely has helped me get a few better armaments out of the dispatch. Also, I'm pretty sure the commendation does give you the armaments you want. So for example, let's say you are doing a normal armament run here, and maybe you're thinking, I might switch it up to get different things out of the formation chest. You could switch it, and let's say I go to V formation. You can switch it last minute, and the V formation stuff will show up in here. So keep that in mind. You're able to switch this last minute if you so want. So if that is something you do want to do, that is something you do have the ability to do, and you can switch it up, whatever armaments you do want. Maybe you want gathering, whatever it may be. You can put that in that dispatch commendation, and you can get a decent reward out of it. The next real improvement we received was really just an improvement to the shop. mainly through the superior chest. Initially, this inscription shard chest could give you an epic inscription. Those, to my knowledge, don't exist anymore, so I mean, it's kind of a collector's item, but really, these epic inscriptions were completely useless. No one used them because the second you got a legendary armament, they were pretty much useless, and you get lots of epic armaments. I've got like 3 inscripted ones here, and all of them are just going to get recycled pretty much no matter what. So those inscriptions, they're not very useful, and that was obviously pretty quickly realized by Lilith, and they've added different items into this superior chest. You can get pretty much transmutation stones out of it, which in my opinion is better than the epic inscriptions. It's still kind of bad in my opinion. I think just having inscriptions, like just one legendary inscription, would be better and make more sense. But I guess at this point, you kind of take what you can get, and these transmutation stones are way better than the epic inscriptions. Also, I'm going to assume you have a higher chance of getting the legendary inscriptions because there are there's way less transmutation stones than there was epic inscriptions in these chests, which in my opinion is just an improvement. I would like to say though, usually I would just hold on to these coins. I wouldn't really use them unless you're looking to just get a certain amount of inscriptions or you're just trying to open these shard chests. Only open them if you're really, really needing it. Otherwise, you're going to have a bunch of inscriptions you might not need or stuff that you can't use, and there's really no point of having it when you could wait and there might be another change to the system, and that is just something we should keep in mind. Sometimes, though, it might not be the case. You can just open these. Personally, though, I do sometimes like to save a little bit. Sometimes I'll open 2 at once, which is what I did to get my first 2 here, or sometimes I'll just open them. But that's just a small thing in case they do add another change to the inscription shard chest. To my knowledge, they probably won't. I feel like they are pretty content with where it is. A lot of players are okay with it now. I think it is still a bit overpriced, but like last time, I feel like once they do change it, they'll probably give us a small refund of swords, which I'm pretty sure happened when they switched the epic inscriptions. They gave everyone a couple of transmutation stones. So it's not too bad if you open it now, but I guess you could have a better chance of getting slightly better items. Also, when it comes to spending these silver coins in the shop, only buy transmutation stones. Everything else here is pretty bad. Formation choice chest, not worth it. The blue ones, definitely not worth it. And then the Sage's Testimonies, I mean, they're okay, but really, you can get a ton of those. You'll pretty much max out your state form over time, which is what happened for me. I maybe spent 10k gems on it max, so you don't really need to bother buying anything besides the transmutation stones out of this main shop. You can buy these in bulk, 15 at a time is fine. You probably won't get enough armaments per week to do that unless you're spending money. But that being said, you'll be able to buy a lot of these stones out of here, and it's definitely going to be the most valuable item between both of the 2 stores. In terms of the best inscription here, I'm going to be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I feel like just going something that you can add to your best formation or armament would be the best option for you. The next thing that was a really big improvement was the ability to get only armaments from travels. Previously, whenever we did traveling, you would have a chance of getting resources or speed ups. I'm sure we all remember that. And it just was not a fun time. You would often travel and just get literal rubbish that you're never going to use, instead of armaments that you could at least recycle to get the silver coins. So the ability to just travel and get those silver coins, pretty much, that's really what they're worth to us, is much better than the ability to travel and get random resources that were in very small amounts, to be fair, which we didn't really care about. So that is definitely a pretty big improvement to the system, and it has helped me get a few better armaments, to be honest, because usually I just get complete rubbish. At least nowadays, I get some form of an armament instead. So overall, I feel that the traveling has definitely improved, and the same thing goes for dispatches. Dispatches previously could give you resources or speed ups, and often you would get some, but now you don't have to worry about that. You are only going to get armaments or Sage's Testimonies if your state form is under level 25. The final real major improvement was just the ability to get more armaments. Over time, just because of all the new additions and events that were added to the game, whatever it may be, there are a lot more ways to access newer armaments or more armaments in Rise of Kingdoms. Infantry mains might be jealous at this. So having the ability to just get more armaments, okay, I don't know what's up with the infantry stats, but having the ability to get more armaments has certainly helped people will just have a better chance of getting better stuff. So overall, when it comes to getting these armaments, there's a lot more ways to access them now. You get them out of KVK missions, you can get them out of just normal events, whatever it may be, and there are armaments in a lot of places. There are also armaments in stuff like the Lucerne's Scroll, and everyone has a much better chance of just getting a larger amount of them. So the fact that there are more armaments available in the game and the RNG way the system is set up just means that because we can access more armaments, we have a better chance of getting better armaments. That's the real overall consensus. Some places, like I said, you can access them There are normal events which give them. So for example, every now and again, we get a formation event where you can spend some gems if you want. Not the best value, but it is an option. There's also the event I absolutely hate, Alliance Mobilization. You can access armaments in there. Lucerne Scroll, you can access armaments in here too. So there's a lot of different ways you can access armaments if you're a bit of a more active player. So there's definitely tons of ways to get armaments nowadays compared to before, which was literally only dispatch, travel, and spend money. There was no other way besides that. But nowadays, there are a lot more methods of accessing legendary, epic armament chests, random armament chests, stuff like that, which over time can give you better armaments or just have a better chance of letting you get better things. So my final consensus when it comes to seeing all these armament changes and the amounts of armaments that we have is that overall there is less RNG in the system. I think everyone can agree that compared to when it first released, the system is much, much better. And there are a bunch of new things coming now. We can track how long it takes until we get a guaranteed rare or legendary inscription on an armament. We can select which armament will receive that legendary inscription, and all of this stuff is coming in the upcoming updates, which is why I thought it was worth mentioning now. And all of this stuff is most certainly very valuable, because it will just allow us to get better armaments and allow us to actually have a more progressive system, which is what we want. We want a system where you can actually gain progress, and it isn't just a random RNG fest. So the fact that armaments are more accessible, there's less RNG involved, you can pick your formation, you can add armaments to your wish list in the upcoming update. All of this is going to be really, really good and allow us to get better armaments, allow us to get armaments that we want, and allow us to have a much less RNG based system. Even for spenders, even for free to players, no matter which type of player you are, pretty much every single change to the armament system has been a good one, and there hasn't really been a negative one since its release. That being said, I do still think the system is a little bit RNG based, and I think it is a little bit too, well, I think it's definitely RNG based, but I think it's a little bit too slow still in terms of progress. Like equipment and stuff like commanders, you get much quicker progress, you're able to actually see it. I guess armaments and formations are a bit more permanent. We don't really get a new armament that's technically better. They're supposed to be fairly equal. So realistically, maybe that's not the goal we're going for with the armament system. Maybe it is just meant to be a much more slow-paced grind, but I find that it can definitely get a bit monotonous, and it's like, I gotta do my travels, and I don't really get good stuff out of it. And that being said, it is still a very RNG thing. So a lot of people, like myself included, I don't really pick up the armament chest from the Alliance Mobilization system, especially when there are other things like gold heads, or even a 4-hour boost that is available. So in Advanced Army Expansion, I'd take over like 2 legendary armaments any day, just because you saw there I opened 12 legendary armaments. There was pretty bad luck unless you're an infantry main. So really, armaments are quite still not in the best position. I find that transmutation crystals are still a bit too expensive. I find that the chest inside the shop, even though it has been improved, is still a bit too expensive. So it is still a very grindy system, but it's certainly way better than when it first released, and I don't hate it as much as the first video I made. If you saw some of my initial videos, armaments, I flamed them. I absolutely hated them. So overall, I think they are definitely a much better system at a higher quality, which is definitely going to be good for all players. So now, if you enjoyed today's video, I just want to ask you guys to please consider giving it a like. Likes on videos definitely help me understand which types of videos that you guys actually enjoy, because whenever I see more likes, I'm like, well, people like that video more. I think that's a fairly logical thing to say. So the more likes a video gets, the more likely I am to make content in that style. So if you enjoy this type of video where I break down the game, I give a bit of a judgment, and I evaluate a system that was really bad that has hopefully been improved, please do let me know in the comments or on the like button down below. Now, I just want to say thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.